How's everyone doing? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, bringing you guys another round of stories around the NFL to discuss on today. Talk about a lot of things that have happened on the social media aspect of things and just in negotiations with free agency all going on. Today on the show, I'm going to be covering the online Twitter beef that happened between Tiki Barber and Saquon Barkley. Obviously, with Saquon going to the Eagles, a lot of people weren't happy about it, but Tiki Barber, a former running back for the Giants, had a lot of things to say. So I'm going to get into that and my thoughts on it. Then I'm going to transition into the Chargers. The news broke today that they were releasing Mike Williams, and that was big for salary cap reasons, but I'm going to talk about that move and potentially more moves that could be coming because they're still not in the best of salary cap situations, so I'll touch on that. Then in the second half of the show, I'm going to dive deeper into the AFC North. There was a lot of interesting moves that happened just in that division, between teams in that division. I think that will greatly impact next season, so I'm going to dive into each of those teams and some of their biggest acquisitions or departures from each of the four teams in the AFC North. And then I'll wrap it all up with a discussion on the Washington Commanders and my belief on them next season. I have high hopes for them, and I think they could be a dark horse next season. Find out all the reasons why towards the end of the show. That's going to be an interesting discussion. But before I jump into the chip shot story of the day, I want to remind you guys, as always, if you have any questions, comments, or want to engage in the show in any way, to please use the tip and donations link running across the ticker below me at gsmcpodcast.net. Again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. This just makes sure I'm able to see your question. It comes in during the live show, right away during the segment. I'm able to read it on air and, maybe take the conversation elsewhere or get a different perspective on what I'm saying. It makes it a lot more fun, in my opinion, and it's also a massive help for this show as well as all the other shows across the network. We always greatly appreciate it anytime you guys are able to use that link. But in saying that, I can move into the first segment. The chip shot story, as always, has to do with Tiki Barber and Saquon Barkley. Arguably the biggest move of free agency was the Saquon Barkley move, not just because it's Saquon Barkley, but because of all the other things that surrounded it. He was a New York Giant, and he had offers from a lot of teams. I'm sure a lot of different teams that weren't in the NFC East wanted Saquon or had the idea that they could get him on their team. But he decided to go to the rival Philadelphia Eagles, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I came on here and talked about it, how, just the drama around the whole thing, the suspense, and then realizing, oh my God, he went to the Philadelphia Eagles. That whole moment was crazy for me, and I'm not even a fan of either of those teams, but I have friends that are, and just their interaction is the kind of interaction you'd expect from fans that, have no real connection to the players or any perspective of being NFL players. So, they could essentially say whatever they want. Any comments or any way that they're feeling is true emotion, and there's not really any limit on what they can say about Saquon or just the whole situation on the Eagles. But it's different when it comes to Tiki Barber, a former running back for the Giants, of all teams, and he was very vocal about his feelings on Saquon before the whole tampering period started. And one of the biggest things, I don't have the exact quote, but to paraphrase it, he said, if Saquon was to leave, if he went to any other team that's not the Eagles or within the division, all the Giants fans would respect him. They would get it. They would still love him because they know that he's a good player and he needed to get his money. And one of the biggest points he emphasized was that he should never entertain the idea of going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Enough is said there. Giants, Eagles, how the feelings are there. But then, just on the first day, I'm pretty sure, of free agency, Saquon signs a big deal for running backs with the Philadelphia Eagles, and right away, Tiki Barber, and a bunch of people gave their reactions, but none was more famous than Tiki Barber's. He was on, I don't know if it was a podcast or just a show that he does in general, but he goes on there and says, "You're dead to us. Saquon, good luck. You're dead to me." And there obviously was a lot of reaction to that. In that aspect, I think he just reacted in the moment. He felt obviously very emotional about it. He prefaced it before free agency started that how he would feel if he went to the Eagles, and Saquon ends up going to the Eagles, and he says that out loud to everyone over social media. Saquon obviously is going to see it, and whether he responds to it, that was a different story, different direction. He does respond to it, and the first thing he said was, "LOL, yup, you're the prime example of loyalty to a team," among other things, like, if fans feel like they have to hate me, let them hate me, it is what it is. He did the best for him. That was the one tweet that he put out there. Then, another response that came out, he also later said, "You've been a hater since I got to New York, and all the dead to me talk, don't smile in my face when you see me." That, a little bit more personal with Tiki Barber, because his quotes from Tiki Barber were pretty personal to begin with, and that's where I wanted to get to, because Tiki Barber, I think, has a very different perspective than a lot of us. I'm not saying he shouldn't be a fan and he shouldn't have those emotions, because he's obviously, by the looks of it, still invested in the Giants. He still wants them to be good because he was there. But at the same time, to respond like that, you don't have to say it on the show or whatever. You could keep that to everyone amongst friends. You could say something else about Saquon, or you could just decide to not comment on it at all, and that would have been enough. Enough people would have known how you felt about it from that moment. But to say, "Oh, you're dead to me," and he said it almost pretty serious, quite honestly, if you look at it, the live video of it, anywhere on social media, he seemed pretty serious about it. He didn't smile or anything really when he said it. I'm pretty sure there was another Giants host on there, so the emotions were already pretty hostile, I guess, from the move. And he said it, and I just think he came at it from a fan perspective right away in that moment, where I think he should have taken a little bit of time to think about it. Know, just from his experience in being in Saquon's position, a running back experiencing an unfair market, what did you expect Saquon to do really in that moment? It's not his fault that he's been with the Giants. He's been there through all the ups and downs of the season. He's been there when they had that one good season with Brian Dable. His first season there, Daniel Jones played great. He was a part of it. Then the rest of the season were pretty lackluster, pretty mediocre. And Saquon was still there. He never really said anything bad about the organization or anything like that. Just kept it all to himself, kept it pretty professional. And obviously, the last straw, I think, for everyone that was aware of the situation, I talked about it a few shows ago, when they decided to pay, Daniel Jones instead of Saquon Barkley. I didn't really understand it. I talked about it. Saquon's been there. He's been your most talented, best player. How could you not pay him? You decide to franchise tag him and extend Daniel Jones, who already had some questions about him. I know he was coming off a decent season, but I think they just were too quick on making that decision, and now a year later, you're hearing things about the Giants moving on from Daniel Jones and not being able to keep Saquon Barkley, and now he goes to the Philadelphia Eagles when it all could have been avoided if you took a different direction when you made that decision on who to give all that money to. And saying all that, Saquon almost has his hands tied in a bit, because he is 27 already, hasn't had any signs of receiving a big contract from the Giants. They've just decided to franchise tag him. No real contract negotiations had been going on at all this offseason. So if you're Saquon, you have a really good option from the Philadelphia Eagles. A big contract. He's the only running back that received more than single digits per year on his contract. So how could you expect another offer to come around that could be even better than that? If you wait too long, that offer might be off the table and you're left with less money to go to potentially a worse team. In the moment, if you're Saquon, you understand it from a player perspective, and that's where I think Tiki Barber should have responded from a player perspective, from a running back perspective, and say something along the lines of, I've been there. I know what the market is like for running backs. I can understand the decision. I'm not happy about it, but I understand it. That would have resonated a lot better with everybody rather than him responding all emotional, saying all these stuff like he did. You're dead to me, Saquon, and stuff like that. How is Saquon going to take it? He took it pretty personal there to some extent, as it seemed in his response. But then, Tiki said that now they're in like a very hostile place, and you'd expect a lot of fans also to feel like that, but that's what just fans do. Fans that are very invested. You can imagine how Giants fans are feeling because of all the frustration and just poor performances they've had in the past. To see their best player go on top of Xavier McKinney, and now you don't really know where you stand at quarterback, they're feeling that sort of way. I just think Tiki Barber should have put his emotions aside just a little bit. You could have still been fired up, but to say things like that, I think he didn't think twice about that statement and what he said. He took it a bit too far for me. And just to compare it to other players you see, a big theme of this free agency has been players switching from rival teams to the other team. It's been more often than it has been in the past, just from my experience of seeing free agency and stuff like that. You had Saquon go to the Eagles, Patrick Queen go to the Steelers, and just among others, there's been some other just flipping of teams within the division. Geno Stone went to the Cincinnati Bengals from the Baltimore Ravens. There's been a lot of flipping teams just within the division, so it seems to be a theme about it, but the difference between those situations and this one was that their former teammates, I should say, were more supportive of it because they understood the business side of it, and they know a contract like this, an opportunity like this might not come around even more. Just another example off the top of my head, Calvin Ridley signed with the Tennessee Titans, another one within the division. He got 4 years, $92 million to go to a rival team, and at that point, you're not thinking about that. How are my teammates going to feel? Am I really doing the right thing? When you're offered that kind of money, life-changing money, a lot of times for players getting their first contract, more often than not, the decision is really made for you when you get a contract like that. And I think Tiki just forgot about all that. He didn't take it into perspective, and he responded more as a fan, where I think he should have responded more in Saquon's shoes and analyzing how he felt in that moment. I'm sure Saquon wasn't happy about it from a bit of his brain where he thought, I'm moving to rival teams. This could be weird in some aspect. I'm sure that crossed his mind at some point, but this was a tough decision in some aspects, and he took it. I think it was the best for him personally, and now undoubtedly he's on a better team, making more money, getting himself more chances of being in the playoffs, competing for the NFC, potentially competing for Super Bowls, and he's going to get hate down the line from Giants fans in general. You'd expect it once they play in New York. The boos are just going to rain down, but, that's just part of it. Fans are going to be fans, and for Saquon, best of luck to Saquon. He's on a better team. I like the move just because it was almost like a TV drama show that I was watching of just a shocking moment that happened. It was awesome because I'm not involved in it at all as a fan, but saying that, I'll leave it there. And in the meantime, I'm going to take it to our first break of the show, and when I come back, I have a lot more NFL stories to get into regarding the Chargers, the AFC North as a whole, and all the moving pieces within just that division, as well as a topic of conversation around the Washington Commanders and how I think they could be sneakily good this coming season. So don't go anywhere. More on that coming up on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.